Hello everybody, just wanted to share my thoughts on the Campfire chat. It's not quite over yet, but they're doing like just the Q&A section, so I figured I'd go ahead and make this. So first thing that's very interesting is they are going to be adding in 6 legendary powers from the previous season, which is actually super awesome because they're adding in Metamorphosis, Moonrise, Hectic, and then they're also doing, what was the other 3? A Curse Touch, blood boiling, and then the undying defensive aspect. So that's pretty interesting, mainly because for some reason they're just buffing basic skill builds again. And then on top of that, it's going to give people that want to run Tybalts easier access to Tybalts, because I believe that the Metamorphosis, let's see, is, yeah, so the Metamorphosis, it looks like, I forget which kind is that. It's a mobility aspect, right? So you can put that on your boots. So that's pretty sweet, actually. To be able to have that in such a non-invasive slot, I guess. So people are going to be able to run this in tandem with Tybalts. It's going to give them easy access to Unstoppable, easy granting of Tybalts, which is going to be probably pretty meta across a lot of builds, I would imagine, just because Tybalts giving you resource back on top of a damage amp is just going to be nuts for a lot of builds. Moonrise being added back into the game is insane because they just added in Pain Gorgers and that ring. So like you have 2 multiplicative damage buffs to basic skills that have already been added into the game, and they're not adding in a third one, and they're massive. They're not small, right? So like when I'm thinking about, like Stormclaw's aspect, right? Like people are running, I think, the resource aspect on the necklace, which I think, because I think you can run on that. If they're not running that, then they're probably running Edge Masters, but regardless, this is going to be an even better replacement to put onto your necklace, because this is going to be an offensive aspect. You put onto your necklace, this is going to do like 120% basic skill damage on top of giving you 20% attack speed, on top of also giving you 15% movement speed, right? Like this is going to be for like Stormclaw, for example, that runs the Crone Staff. This is going to be like de facto probably the absolute best aspect you can put on your amulet. It's probably going to end up replacing things like, what's it called, like Overcharge aspect, I think, are what people are going to run, because I think people are really just running that just because there isn't really a whole lot else to run. So now most people are probably going to swap it out for this because this is just such a big damage increase. And on top of that, the build doesn't really lack AoE damage because of the addition of Pain Gorger's Gauntlets, which if you run something like Tempest, it marks everything. Then you hit something of the basic skill, it causes that basic skill damage to explode at 200% increased damage, to deal damage to anything that was marked with your AoE skills. So like just insane. Like basic skill builds should just be kind of bonkers, really. They're going to be, if it's not, if this doesn't bump up Stormclaw, for example, to being like S tier, I don't know what would. But we also have Hectic utility aspect coming in, so after 5 basic skills, one of your active cooldowns is reduced by 2 to 4 seconds, and this is a utility aspect, so this is pretty good again. I mean, I'm not sure exactly which builds are going to want this, but pretty much any build that has just a bunch of cooldowns can use this pretty easily. It's going to assimilate to a lot of builds. Like right now, like I'm seeing 3 aspects here that could be assimilated into quite a few builds. You go over here to a Curse Touch. I'm not sure how many people are going to use a Curse Touch. It might be good at lower levels, but I don't really see how this is going to be really that great. I don't remember exactly what Vampiric... Oh yeah, so Vampiric Curse are also vulnerable. So I mean, like, I guess it gives you... But it's an offensive aspect slot, so this one isn't really that great, I don't think. Like, I don't really see what builds would use this, but who knows. Blood Boiling aspect. Now you might see this in like Bloodlance or something, because if I'm not mistaken, I think that build doesn't have every single slot is like a super 100% necessary, but I'm not really sure how every 20 seconds your next skill is guaranteed to overpower. I don't really know like how good that's really going to be compared to the other ones, so I don't know how much this is going to be ran, but it's still not going to be bad, especially like as a placeholder until you find the piece of gear you need. Or the legendary you need. I don't think this one's going to be bad. Then you have Undying aspect. When you cast a skill, you heal for double life. This is one I thought was interesting because with the addition of Juggernaut's aspect, I think going Juggernauts and Undying would be a pretty solid combo if you cast a lot of skills. So I think this one will be used somewhat, not in all builds or anything like that, but I do think that this is a very good defensive aspect in combination with things like Juggernauts or something like that. So you have your armor and stuff already taken care of. But then again, one thing we have to think about is, your pants slot is probably going to be going away, so it might be hard to run this plus, aspect of might or the one that gives you the 20% damage reduction. So it might be hard to run all three of those because I think so many builds are going to want to run Tybalts now. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll see how that turns out. So that's it for the vampiric powers. So mid-season updates, they're trying to take away snapshotting. They fixed a bunch of snapshots. They fixed some bugs for the rogue. And then for the Gauntlet, you're not going to be able to change your skills tree, your Paragon, and they did say that you will not be able to snapshot in the Gauntlet, but it doesn't really matter. I'll get into that later. So class updates, so some double dipping was happening with the Seneschal. The big changes here is they kind of nerfed the poison support. They nerfed the bleeding damage, the bonus bleed damage that you get, and then they nerfed the burning support. So they kind of nerfed the extra damage you're getting out of this. And then they turbo nerfed Tempest. It no longer gains bonus damage and duration when it's reapplied or when it spreads. So realistically, they kind of just gutted one of the highest damage setups, I guess, for the Seneschal Companion. You're still going to be able to do the Firefly and the Seeking combo, which is going to do a decent amount of damage, but it's not going to do as much because you're not going to have this Tempest anymore, which kind of sucks, or not this like good Tempest damage anymore. But it's not really that big of a deal because most people aren't even running this Seneschal for damage. But for those of you that were, yeah, it's not going to be as good. So right now, class updates. So when it comes to the Barb, they're not planning on nerfing anything yet. But they are buffing underused skills, so Call of the Ancients, damage bonuses going up, Strategic Iron Skin, Fortify amount going up, Strategic Ground Stomp Ultimate CDR is going up, so that's cool. Moving right along, buffing Gore's Devastating Grip, so more ranks of Whirlwind, increasing the explosion damage. So yeah, not really any nerfs coming in. So for Sorcerer, pretty big Incinerate buffs just across the board. I think like everything about Incinerate is getting buffed. So that's pretty cool. I mean, a 40% damage buff to Incinerate's pretty solid, and then the enhanced Incinerate damage went from 25 to 50%, so it's like a 65% damage buff to Incinerate. Buffs to Conjuration skills, buff to underused passives. Full patch notes are going to be out tomorrow, so we're not going to get to see the exact numbers. So we have on the Druid, they're buffing the basic skills, which is hilarious. Because the fact they're buffing basic skills, if they're going to buff all of them again, that means Stormclaw is going to get even more buffs. Like, just wild buffs to Stormclaw here. But the thing I'm most excited for, obviously, is going to be the companion damage buffs. So they said that there is going to be massive, like, big wolf damage increase, and then there's going to be a damage increase to Poison Creeper and Ravens, which is 100% exactly what companions needed, because Ravens and Poison Creeper already did damage. But the wolves, like, comparatively, even when I had, like, all of the stat buffs on them, was not doing as much as Poison Creeper or Ravens. And then when you also factor in that they die so easily in higher up tiers, it's harder to, like, put all your resources into that. It's better when you're playing the Companion Druid to, like, focus more on, like, Poison Creeper and stuff like that, because Poison Creeper is just the goated companion ability. It's just the best one by far. Even at tier 100s, you will just be constantly reapplying poison and just, like, doing, like, things whole entire health bar after you've pressed Poison Creeper on them a couple times. But with these wolves buffs, if they finally just buff the passive damage so it's actually comparable, because if you're not familiar with, like, here, let me show you, like, just the difference in this, right? So look at this. So 5 out of 5, right? So the passive damage does 14% of your weapon damage. You come down here, this does 34%, so this does almost double. Plus you have to remember that you also get a passive damage increase of 40% from Brutal Ravens, right? So the passive damage on Ravens is just much higher than the passive damage on Wolves. You do get a 25% increased damage to this, but still, it's like you just have higher numbers on that. And then you look at Poison Creeper. Poison Creeper does 50%. Right, and admittedly, all of these are actually low on the passive damage. Like, because if you look and see like what I have in game, I have this up to where it's like, since I have like 17 ranks of Poison Creeper or something crazy like that right now, this goes up to like 500% or something crazy. and this goes up to like 500% or something crazy like that as well. But Wolves does not gets up to like 300% or something, right? So like Wolves is by far, in terms of just sheer damage numbers, the weaker skill. However, if they buff the numbers on it, it's going to make it a much different story, especially if they buff the numbers across everything, which apparently is their plan. Like we might actually see, because like right now, obviously I have videos of me clearing tier 100 as a companion druid this season, so obviously yes, you can clear any content in the game with companion druid. Do not let people lie to you. That is not true when people say that you cannot clear all content in the game with it. Yes, you can. However, the build is still weaker compared to other builds, and it definitely does need buffs, but it is a playable build. Like the reputation companion druid has right now is not very accurate in my opinion. But with these buffs, it's probably going to bring eyeballs to it, and we'll see what the buffs and what the actual numbers are tomorrow. But I'm hoping they really turbo buff the passive damage, and then the next buff that they're doing, which is super sweet, is they're buffing underused passives. Okay, that's cool. We don't know exactly which one those are yet, but they're also buffing Storm's Companion unique. So if you are not familiar with the turbulent history of Storm's Companion and this unique, it used to be bugged where it said that it changed your wolves into a nature magic skill and a storm skill. It actually did not do that, right? So, and then they actually removed that and they fixed the bug, so now it actually appropriately does not do that. But it does make your wolves do lightning damage. But because it does not turn wolves into a nature magic or a storm skill, the unique kind of just became useless compared to something like Tybalt's that got added in when you have 3 different skills that you can buff with Tibbles. That 40% increase is just kind of completely overtaken that. But if the buffs are big enough, which they said Stormhowl damage is increased by roughly 180%, right? And they did a little like demonstration, so you can see here it was doing 148. Now it's doing 100 or 1305, and this was all done at like the same, same level, same gear. That's like 10x damage, right? Like what it ends up translating to. So when you also think about that, I believe they also buffed the skill ranks from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. So they gave it 2 extra ranks on top of that. And also keep in mind that like once you buff this up all the way, like I think it got up to like 8 already. So that means I think it's going to do like 10 ranks of wolves. Like you might, and you also consider you have aspect of the alpha, which if you put it on a 2-handed weapon is going to be a 230% increase to wolves damage. Like you might actually see a legitimate wolves build, because with the addition of hectic as well, and the fact you can reduce the cooldown by 2 to 4 seconds, that's a little crazy. Because if you can get it to where you're actually proccing the wolves, your CD is going to be super low. On top of that, you have like pack leader for resets. Like there might actually be a legitimate wolves build that comes out of this, like after this patch, or it's just like you just focus on wolves only, because wolves actually does have good legendaries that combo with it, right? And then you also look at like rabies damage increases and stuff like that. So yeah, pretty excited to see what the actual numbers are, because the big thing here is going to be what is that actual number. Now, and they said specifically that it's going to be very big numbers for wolves, and then just a normal type damage increase for poison creeper and ravens. So, but what they view as a big damage increase and what the community views as a big damage increase is going to be a completely different thing. But the Stormhowl damage increase, I do think that this could potentially put that legendary back on the map. And one last thing on the note of Storm's Companion is the coolest part about it is that it turns your active into like an AoE blink. So the functionality of wolves gets way improved when you put on Storm's Companion. So very excited to see how that turns out. Can't wait to test out some of those changes and to see what the buffs are. And it's interesting to me that they're buffing companions, because he said specifically in the little clip when they were talking about it that they said that they were getting feedback that people want to be able to play Companion Druid, right? Granted, you can play Companion Druid, it's just not good comparatively to all the other, it's not like super good compared to all the other builds, right? Because in Diablo 4 community, and this has been my experience across ARPGs, is most people are going to flock to whatever the de facto strongest build is, and then all the other builds are going to kind of fall to the wayside, even if they're like not necessarily bad. Most people just focus on playing what's the most broken. So I don't think Companion Druid is ever going to become super popular until it becomes absolutely busted. But but yeah. But it's interesting that they backtracked on that, because in previous Campfire chats they said that if you want to play a minion build, you should be playing Necromancer, but it seems like they've kind of backtracked it now, and now they're more open to the idea of a companion build actually happening, which I think makes sense because, you know, if you've listened to some of my thoughts on it, like why would you, if you don't want companions to do damage, this is a useless passive, this is a useless passive, this is a useless passive, like this would be what you would want. You would also want something like this and something like this. You would just want it to have all utility passives, but it seemed like putting damage passives on them makes absolutely no sense if you do not want like an actual companion build to be a thing. But it looks like they backtracked on that, so that's pretty cool. Moving on to Rogue, so Heartseeker, Forceful Arrow, attack speed's being increased, so it looks like just a little bit of damage increase for some of the basic skills again. Flurry buffs, damage increase, improved and advanced flurry buffs, cool. Precision stacks reduced from 6 to 4, so just more range buffs, which is pretty interesting. They changed Barrage, increased the damage of arrows that ricochet from Barrage from 40% to 72%. Arrows have a 52% chance to split into 2 arrows whenever they ricochet, so that's pretty cool because it actually gives them a damage increase. So yeah, arrows have a 20% chance to split into 2 arrows whenever they ricochet, so, and then increases the damage of the arrows that ricochet, so this actually puts a damage buff on these. So that's pretty interesting. Unless it was reducing it by a certain amount, it was like, but based on the way I'm reading this, this is just a damage buff to Barrage, which is cool. Class updates to, so minion buffs, damage increased by 20% baseline, health increased by 10%. Okay, Hellbent Commander damage bonus increased to from 10/20 to 30 to 15/30 to 45. Okay, that's pretty sweet. Cult Leader Legendary node increased from 10 to 15% per 20% attack speed. Okay. Corporeal Glyph redesign. You and your minions deal 10% increased physical damage, and you gain 1% movement speed for each active minion. Oh, that is huge, actually. That is the fact that you get 1% increased movement speed for each active minion when you can have out like, what is it, like 9, 10 minions or something like that? Like, I forget what the exact number is, but like that's actually pretty cool. Like, they're giving them actual movement speed, so when you stack that on with other things, like, oh man, maybe even like, I don't know if this would be good, but like if they were to somehow weave in just other movement speed buffs like Moonrise or something like that, where they just try to like stack a bunch of attack speed bonuses, you might actually see Necromancers being able to move pretty fast with the minion build. Top of the damage increase, that's cool. Will it be enough to actually, will it actually be enough to push minions further? Who knows? Looking to do more in Season 4, so. Okay. Let's see here. So buff functionality adjustments to underused passive. So spiked armor now grants thorns and 5 to 10% additional, 15% additional armor. Okay. Death's reach, death's advance changing from damage to distant enemies to instead to grant 4, 8, 12% movement speed. Okay. So they're changing it to give more movement. So that's 2 movement speed buffs. That's actually pretty good. Just more movement speed for the Necromancer. Like, that's pretty cool. Blight, Blood Surge, Sever are all getting core skill buffs, so that's pretty cool too, because Blood Surge, I think, kind of falls off later on in the game. So gameplay updates. So they had a question, and this is something they just wanted feedback on. They were saying that they wanted to try to keep all the legendaries equal across, and they didn't want to start adding in new legendaries even if they had them finished, just because they didn't want things to become unbalanced where one class had more legendaries. And my thoughts on it is this, because the one they were talking about is they said they had a new Fireball legendary, would be no, do not add it into the game, because Fireball already has a legitimate build that is not bad, and it does not need more, right? Like, they should be looking at all of the skills that do not have a legendary aspect and focus on making a skill for that legendary, or sorry, for that, or legendary aspect for that skill. That's what they should do, right? They need to look at like things like Lacerate on the Druid does not have a legendary aspect. Put in a legendary aspect that buffs Lacerate, right? Ravens, for example, right? Then you go into, I'm not sure exactly for the other classes what it is, but I know just speaking from Druid, and this applies to all classes that have skills that do not have like dedicated legendary aspects. But like you look at things like Lacerate does not have one. Cataclysm doesn't really have one. The only one that does is Grizzly Rage. Petrify also doesn't have one. Rabies has one, but it's not really that great. Boulder has one. Hurricane has one, but it's not that great. Ravens does not have one. Poison Creeper doesn't really have one that really makes sense or is relevant. So I think personally that's what they should do. They should focus on just filling out all the skills that do not have legendaries. Like this one, like even Tornado doesn't really have one. Like it has one that just makes it seek targets, which is cool, but it doesn't have one that's like just makes it do some cool effect, right? Like for example, like I think it'd be cool if they just took Ravens and then they put a legendary on it and it made it functioned as like a Raven themed tornado where it was just throwing out tornadoes that were just all Ravens and stuff like that. Like that would be pretty sweet. But same stuff like that. But I mean, there is a lot of skills in the game. I don't think Maul has a legendary aspect either, but I think that if you start adding in legendary aspects that for builds that are already established and for skills that already have legendary aspects, that's what's going to create your imbalance, as opposed to like one class just having more legendaries than the other. I think if they just focus on filling out every skill and making sure that they have viable legendaries that are fun to use, even if they're not like super broken min-max, but are just fun to use, I think that would go a lot further than that, as opposed to just constantly adding in new legendaries for like the most popular builds, which I think would be kind of dumb. But hey, I don't know. That's my thoughts on it. After that, so then you have the Gauntlet will be added. So pretty much the way the Gauntlet works is you sit on a map and you run around said map. You run around said map and you just kill stuff. You get score. You have 6 minutes to complete it. It's going to be about a tier 70 of difficulty. So most builds, I mean actually all builds, are going to be able to participate. It's not going to be so much about damage. It's going to be more of about like getting enough damage to one-shot things and then having as much movement speed as possible so you can just kill things as quickly as possible and then keep on running. They did 3 different showcases. They did like a ball lightning sork, and then they did the Hoda Barb, and by far obviously they did the charge Hoda Barbs just absolutely just annihilated everybody else in score. I think it was like, yeah, so 262,000 or something like that. Yeah, 200. So almost 300,000. I think the highest that the other classes got was, let's see here. Let's look at the ball lightning sork. So 173. Yeah, so the ball lightning sork I think got like a little over 200. Yeah. So you can see that obviously, charge barb and the builds that have really good mobility are going to do really well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. There's going to be a leaderboard. Whoever can get the highest score. There's going to be, they said 16 different leaderboards, so it's going to be one for each class. Plus, there's going to be, I don't know what some of the leaderboards are going to be, but I know they're going to have a 2, 3, 4 player. Then they're going to have the solo class, like the solo leaderboards for each class. So I don't know where the other leaderboards are coming from, but they were saying there's going to be 16 different leaderboards. So I'm not sure what all you're going to be ranked on, or if they have maybe like specific skills or certain build types or something like that you can fight for the leaderboards on. So that's pretty interesting. But yeah, so it's not really going to be crazy difficult in terms of monster difficulty, but it is going to be like you're going to need to hit like a certain damage threshold and then just put everything else into movement speed. So the theory crafting will be pretty interesting. You do get rewards for completing these, and then you also get like a weekly cash or something like that for doing the Gauntlet. You're going to have something called a seal, and then as you do the trials, you'll level up your seal, which is cool. That's really it though for the Gauntlet. It's not anything too crazy. Hopefully this doesn't get boring. I'm hoping the competitive spirit of the community kind of keeps people really engaged and active in doing this stuff. But again, full patch notes tomorrow. But that's really going to be it. That's all the main points for the Campfire chat. I don't really think that there's anything that relevant to really talk about aside from that. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe if you want to see more. I'll see you next time. Thanks.